So I'm finally really excited to talk about Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Now, this is one of those sequels that is considered one of the worst ever made, even considered one of the worst movies ever made, which even loving this movie, I could see why people hate this movie or dislike it, but I think worst movies ever made, I think this does not fit on that. I think it's just such a negative reception whenever it came out because it was The Exorcist, the first one was just a straightforward horror movie. This is a odd sequel, and it did so many things that a lot of people thought tainted the original. So I understand why people dislike this, but worst movie ever made, I do not think so. I think that this has filmmaking with it. I think it has incredible things about it. So let's get into Exorcist 2, The Heretic. And I'm going to say this a million times. I love this movie. I love it. It's just so insane. But even the stuff that people hate, I think, is so fun, even though it's so over the top and so goofy. And the everything about it, I think there's so many great things about it, so I'll just get into it. I feel like this doesn't deserve to be the worst movie ever made. Like, it doesn't deserve to even be in that category, honestly. And if we're talking like being unique, this is truly one of the most unique sequels I've ever seen. And I know whether you love it or hate it, I know people are going to be like, oh, it's awful, I don't care. But to me, whether you love or hate this movie, you can't deny that this is one of the most ballsiest sequels ever made. It is so uniquely different than the first one. Like, this is insane, and I love how it is that insane. I know people hate it, I know people think it's awful, but I think this, whether you love it or hate it, this has such a unique, distinct difference to the first one. It is such a drastic difference that I feel like should be noted, that it actually has creativity and uniqueness. This is a very creative and unique film, despite people hating a lot of things about it. I think this is incredibly unique. And I'm going to talk about stuff that I think is silly and stuff that I love, and I still love the movie regardless, so whenever I talk about the silly stuff, I'm not dissing on it, I just think it's fun. Like the opening scene with the new priest, Father Lamont, who comes in to do an exorcism on this this Spanish girl, and she like goes, like, she becomes possessed, and he throws holy water on her, and then she starts throwing down all these candles in this area they're at, and then she just stands there with her arms out in the candles, burning up. So she just looks all happy that she's getting burnt up. And then it literally, as she gets burnt up more, like, her reaction is one of the most craziest, silliest reactions in a movie I've ever seen. Because she just goes, ah, ah, and then, like, her face just becomes a skeleton, because, of course, this is from 1977, and I still love that they did this, where it's shows her a real shot and then cuts to a shot of a skeleton like she burnt. I thought that was incredibly silly, but it's so fun. I love that scene. It's so odd and so silly, but I don't care. I mean, I know people say it ruins the first one, but I think that is so incredibly fun, and how silly this is. Like, moments like that make me laugh, and I know it shouldn't. I know that people would think, oh, you shouldn't like this because it's making you laugh. It's unintentionally funny. But I don't care. I love this movie because it's just so entertaining, regardless. I really do. It makes me laugh out loud. And then we go to Reagan McNeil. It's been 4 years since the last movie, since the first one. And she apparently doesn't remember anything, even though she does. And I like the fact that they do a thing where I don't know if she's repressing it or if she's just hiding the fact about it because she doesn't want anybody else to be scared for her, like Gene Tuscan, who is trying to drag these memories out of her about the exorcism, and being possessed. And Father Lamont comes in to, like, he goes to the cardinal, and like he says, like, you need to investigate Father Marin's death, but it's 4 years later, so kind of too late for that. But they also say in the movie, to be fair, they say that this is not an on record, like, death check. Like, they're literally, like it's not like the police didn't check into what happened to Marin in the first movie. It's just, they're just checking now, like, trying to find more into it. Because the Cardinal thinks that, in the end, Marin became a Satanist. And I like that it kind of does this thing with religion, where, like, Lamont, the new priest in this movie, is talking about, like, talking to the Cardinal about, like, he shouldn't have been a Satanist at the end, like, but then the Cardinal's like, yeah, we believe he became that because that's how he died. And I just think that's interesting how they do fall back on the first one in interesting ways like that. So Lamont goes and tries to investigate, and he goes to that building where Gene Tusken is keeping Reagan because her mother is on location. Good way to get the actress who played Chris McNeil out of the movie, because I bet she despised the script for this movie. I'm just assuming that she didn't want to be in this movie, because they mentioned her a couple times, like, oh, your mother's on location. And it's so obvious that, like, the actress didn't want to be in the movie. But yeah, so Reagan's mom is just gone completely, and Reagan is living in this building, this psychiatric building, with Gene Tusken, who runs it all, in this awesome but weird building. This is what I mean. This has got such cool, like, this reminds me of a Stanley Kubrick film, the way that this room looks and is shot. They're in this room that is literally shaped like, say, like a giant nut. Like, where it's got in the middle, it's got a room, and then in between it's got little rooms all around it, and it looks like a big conjoined circle. So, like, you walk in and see people all around in a circle, but then there's even another circle behind them. So they're all layered, like all these different layered rooms where you can see through them all at the same time. And whenever they're in the room, like the main room with Tusken and Reagan, they shut off the lights of the other room, so they just dim the lights, and it just becomes dark in this room. And I love how incredibly cinematic these shots look in this location. Like, this is incredible. And I wonder how hard it was for the cameraman not to have his camera reflection in this, because it reflects on every single room in these multiple rooms going back behind each other. This was just a unique looking area, and I love how unique it looks. But we get this location that I'm talking about, where Gene Tusken is taking care of Reagan, trying to get the memories out of her, and they have this machine that just comes up where Gene Tusken says that this will be able to put us in sync, so I can see your memories and we can go through this and fight together. So this is pre-Inception, because this literally is a thing where this box, it's just two flashing strobe lights where they flash at each other, and like, it's like they go into their dream, and it literally reminds me of a pre-Inception movie. That would be the funniest thing if Christopher Nolan took something from this movie and used that in Inception. So they've got this machine that will put them in sync with their dreams and connect. And I know this sounds insanely silly, but I don't care. I love how silly it is. But they go into sync and go into their first dream sequence together, where, like, Lamont comes in and he wants to figure out what happened to Marin, so he tries to get Reagan and Tusken to have him go in there too, to go into the dream, or go use the machine, like, to go in sync with somebody. So Reagan and Gene go in sync together, and then Tusken sees the scene that is not in the first Exorcist, which, honestly, again, this is cool that this does this again, where it shows a scene from the first movie that was not shown, where in the first Exorcist, Father Marin, like, Karras runs in and Marin's already dead after he left for a while in the end of the movie, and you just see Marin's dead. You don't see anything happen. And in this movie, you see it happen. You see, with an obvious stunt double, but you also obviously see an obvious Reagan McNeil double possessed, and this scene, which is actually really good, where it shows possessed Reagan and Marin, and they're talking, and Marin is trying to get the demon out of Reagan, but the demon is saying, like, she's mine always, and, like, you see this amazing, again, amazing cinematic shots in this movie, some of the coolest I've ever seen, where it shows the dream, and then it shows on top of that what's happening with Reagan holding on to Jean's heart in the real moment of the movie, where she's holding on to her heart because Jean's heart is getting lower, like she can't take this fear. And you see the shot of Reagan holding on to Jean's heart, like chest, while it does the same, while it shows behind it the actual scene from the first movie that they made in this movie with Marin and possessed Reagan, like grabbing at Jean's heart, but she's actually grabbing at Marin's heart, and that is such a cool, like they are layered on top of each other. The dream and the actual thing that's happening in this movie, and that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a movie. Like, that is incredible. I love that scene where literally it's possessed Reagan and real Reagan trying to grab Jean's heart, but it's also Marin's heart at the same time, because it's showing the past, but it's showing Jean's heart can't take it in real life. So, like, they're both grabbing at her heart, trying to pull apart to grab the heart. That is just incredible. And Jean, like, makes it through, but she almost dies from fear of just seeing this, like, and Reagan says before that, like, I don't think you're up for it. I don't think you're prepared. So I really love that scene. That's such a cool scene. Really awesome. And I like how Tuscan and Lamont, like, after this, they have conflicting, like, arguments against each other, where, like, Tuscan wants to keep this, like, she doesn't want to keep Reagan from, like, I guess having Reagan not fully get these memories back, and Lamont wants it because he thinks that it'll help everybody out, it'll benefit everybody out to do this. So I like that conflicting argument between them both. And then Reagan, who is supposedly not possessed anymore, after the first movie, she starts having these weird things happen to her, where, like, the demon will send her outside at her apartment place, and she'll stand on top of a ledge, and, like, she's flying like a locust. And then she'll have moments where, like, she draws a picture of Lamont, which looks nothing like Lamont, but, like, it looks like fire, I guess Lamont thinks, and he goes down with Tuscan down underneath the building, and, like, there's something on fire, a box. So I like how it's so weird, but I like how Reagan isn't what you don't know if she's really possessed until really, but they do a cool job of having, like, these little strange occurrences happen, like the fire in the building, or Reagan, like, being possessed a little bit to go outside, almost like on the edge of that ledge, which that actually really happened. Linda Blair was actually on that ledge of that building. Like, that shot of the camera going down, seeing all those cars, that is terrifying, because she actually was there, no harness. That is scary. That's horrible. So glad she didn't get in a horrible death or accident, because that is truly scary. John Borman is ballsy, I'll tell you that. Man. And then I also forgot to say, whenever we have that first moment where they go in sync with that machine, like, Lamont literally looks at the camera and says, "It is horrible. Utterly horrible." And, like, Richard Burton was apparently drunk throughout this whole movie. And honestly, I don't think I could tell in a lot of moments. I think in a lot of moments, honestly, he's still, like, I don't think he's drunk. Like, it's funny that they say he was, but, I mean, the moment where he talked to the camera himself, I think he was drunk. But the other moments, I don't feel like he really was drunk. I mean, I guess he was, but I guess he's that good of an actor, because I didn't feel like he was very drunk watching him react to stuff and acting. I thought he was fine. But I also like how Reagan and Lamont start having the same kind of visions, where Reagan, like I said, where she goes to the side of the building of her apartment whenever the demon says, "Let's go flying," and then it's the locust. And then whenever Lamont goes in sync with her, like, the demon takes him with him, and he goes to Africa in this whenever he's in sync and sees Kokomo. And I love how it just does this thing where Reagan and Lamont both are incredibly important in this movie, where they both have all these visions that, in the end, like connect. And I liked them doing that. It was just a really cool way of extensive way of like making this movie so much different than the first one, which again is why people hate it. But yeah, I also like the scene where Sharon, which this actress I think doesn't get enough recognition in this movie. The actress who played Sharon from the first one is back in this one. She kind of takes over for the mother character because the mom, of course, the actress who played the mom, Chris, didn't come back. So Sharon is now the kind of owner of Reagan in a way. And she and Lamont go back to the Georgetown house for the first time in this movie. And I thought it was interesting that whenever they go there, this is a great performance from Sharon, because she says this plays into her demise at the end, but Sharon goes into this house with Lamont and she's she explains what happened and how she hid away from Reagan for 2 long years and she almost went insane, and then she realized being with Reagan is the only time she feels content. And I think, and the actress who played Sharon, I think Kitty Wynn, her performance in that scene is really, really good. It's really moving. Whenever she says the line, the only time I actually am at peace is when I'm with her. That was a great line read from her. She was really good in this scene. And I love how Lamont asks about Marin, and then he said, did the demon have a name? And Sharon goes, no, but it knew his. Which is where we get to the name of the demon. Now, I don't know if this was in the book for the first Exorcist movie. I don't know if it was, or maybe they just omitted it from the movie. Or maybe they just made it up in this movie, but I don't know. I haven't read the Exorcist book, but this is really interesting because the demon's name is Pazuzu, which is not really a scary name. It's very unintentionally silly, so... So people... Again, another thing people hate about this movie. That's such a silly demon's name. But it's such a weird name that it cracks me up that we've got a demon named Pazuzu. It just sounds like... It sounds like kazoo. It's such a silly name. God. And he learns the name as Pazuzu whenever he goes in sync with Reagan. And then while he is being taken, later while he's being taken on the Locust, while he's in sync with Reagan, you see the camera view of the Locust flying around in Africa. But when it does, it's got this African woman voice, and it is so goofy. It is literally it's just gibberish. While this camera is going around in Africa, it's supposed to be the Locust point of view. It's just, you'd hear, it's... I understand that it's African, it's supposed to be African, words, but I think it's literally just gibberish. They're not even trying to say anything African. They're just literally saying gibberish, and it is so unintentionally silly. And then you hear the Locust go, it's just this weird noise as it flies around, trying to pounce at somebody. It's so silly. And then they encounter Kokomo, James Earl Jones, in a Locust outfit, and then Kokomo just does a growl, and then their sync ends, and then Lamont goes and finds Kokomo while Reagan is there, staying in where she lives. And it is so weird to have all these actors in this movie, but they do so many odd things. James Earl Jones, the great James Earl Jones, is wearing a Locust suit outfit. It's so silly. But that's why I love it, because it's just so ballsy and how incredibly nuts it is. This is one of the most craziest movies I've ever seen in just terms of being so out there. I love this because of that. And then there's this scene that is really silly, but I love it, where Reagan, since Reagan is still at that place she lives at, and Lamont goes off to Africa to find Kokomo. Reagan has this really weird but great scene where this little girl she saw earlier, who's one of the girls who is in this area for, like, I guess mentally challenged people in a way. And there's this girl who is mute, and Reagan says, "Hi, like, do you have a name? What's your name?" And then Reagan just looks at her for a second, and then the girl starts saying, I can't speak." And then she goes, "Sure you can, try it." And then you just see Reagan smile, and then the girl like literally starts talking. And with the score playing during this, which is one of my favorite scores ever made, Reagan's theme in this movie, this is a beautiful scene, even though it's silly, because Reagan makes her talk with her gift. And like then there's this one line which just, it doesn't make me cringe, but it's so silly because it's just so random, where the girl starts talking and she's like, "What's the matter with you?" And then Reagan says, "Oh, I was possessed by a demon." And then the little girl makes a look like, and then Reagan's like, "Oh, it's okay, he's gone." And then she just laughs, and I'm like, it's really silly. What does that mean? Why did you say that like that? That's so nonchalant to bring up a conversation about how you were possessed by the devil. But besides that, even though I like that, it's silly. But besides that, this is a very moving scene where Reagan, you realize, has a gift of, like, helping people. And, like, she can use this ability to make this girl talk. Again, such a weird thing that you wouldn't think is in the first movie, because this is so different. But I love that scene, and I love the score. Let's talk about Reagan's theme. That is one of my favorite themes ever made. Like, Ennio Morricone, like, just incredible composer no matter what. Like, but this is one of my absolute favorite pieces of music ever, her theme. And I listen to it constantly. Like, I love it so much. It's one of the most beautiful, most haunting, most epic scores I've ever heard. I love that score of Reagan's theme so much. And I also like how after this, whenever Lamont is in Africa and Reagan is there at the place, like they start having this psychic connection to each other, which I thought was pretty cool. Where like Lamont goes to investigate, he finds this guy that was killed, and like this backstory about this guy who was killed in Africa. But then he mentions to all the people, like, "Oh, I rode on the wings of Pazuzu," and then all the people are throwing rocks at him. And while that happens, Reagan is tap dancing at this like recital thing that she's doing at the place she lives at the institute, and he gets hit by a rock, and then she has a reaction where she falls down and flails and freaks out. And I like how they both have this literal psychic connection to each other, like they need each other in this importance. Like, it's really cool. And then Lamont finds Kokomo again after the first initial time he sees him. And then it's like he's sitting there in the locust outfit, Kokomo, and Lamont it's between Lamont and him. There's a big water and big spikes in the water. So Lamont Lamont's gonna walk over, but Kokomo says, you gotta come over past these things in the ground. So Lamont literally steps in the water, gets impaled in his foot, and then falls down, but then he just wakes up. And then Kokomo is not wearing the locust outfit, he's just a normal kid. So it's weird. It was just a weird dream that was just randomly in there for no reason, where Lamont sees him in the locust outfit, steps on the spikes, falls down into the spikes, but then he just wakes up, and Kokomo's a normal guy in Africa just studying locusts. So it's a really weird like spot in the movie. I'm like, why is that there? Even though weird is an understatement for this movie, but you know what I mean. And then Tuscan and Sharon, like, they both go together because then Reagan leaves with Marin whenever he comes back. To try to find, or they gotta find Lamont and Reagan. And I love the fact that after this happens, like after the initial, like the ending's gonna start, or the last act's gonna start, we get a cool revelation in this movie where, like I said, with Reagan and her power, and I love this because Reagan's got this ability, apparently, But I love how whenever Kokomo is talking to Lamont about the locust, and there's some locust that can not be brushed by the wings of Pazuzu, where they will be invulnerable to it, and Pazuzu goes out and tries to get the people who are invulnerable, like Reagan from the first movie, and that girl at the beginning of the movie, and I love that, and I love how it shows Marin from the first movie. Whenever they go and sync again, Reagan and Lamont, and Marin says to Lamont, like, take care of Reagan. She is precious to me. She is one of the good ones that can survive this. Like, she is important to the world. And I love that scene. That's a really great scene. So you realize that Reagan has had this ability, and Pazuzu wanted to take it away from her, and take it away from the people who are going to be invulnerable to this demon. So I really thought that was such an incredible, like, addition to this film from the first one. I love that. I love that she has this literal ability that might be able to help mankind, and then Pazuzu, the bringer of evil, is going to try to take it away from her and take it away from all the people who might one day be invulnerable to Pazuzu. So I think that's awesome. I love that. So, like, it eventually ends to where all four of them, Reagan, Lamont, Sharon, and Tuscan, are going to the Georgetown house. Like, it's leading there. And Sharon and Tuscan have this weird, like, crash where, like, it's where Lamont and Reagan are in the Georgetown house. And then the locusts all come out of the closet and swarm Lamont. And while this happens, something hits the car where Tuscan and Sharon are riding in, and then they crash right into the Georgetown house. And then, like, you see that there's another iteration of Reagan that is the demon, the literal Pazuzu. While this is happening, and this is hard to explain, but while this is happening, Tuscan and Sharon get out of the car kind of unscathed, basically. Sharon, and this is such a weird scene if you don't understand the context of it, but Sharon just suddenly becomes evil because Tuscan's like, Sharon, let me in, I've got to get into the house. And then Sharon blocks her way. She literally holds on, puts her foot in gasoline, and lights herself on fire. And it is so silly with her look and the music, like African music in the background is so silly. But Sharon lights herself on fire. But honestly, rewatching it, it's not as silly as I thought it was. I mean, it's silly, but not as abrupt with her just lighting herself on fire. I think the reason she did is because of that scene earlier where she goes with Lamont to the Georgetown house at the beginning, where she says that she went basically insane, like this, like maybe the Pazuzu is actually possessing her in a way, like it actually is physically messing with her. So even though it's not really explained very well, I guess that makes more sense why she lit herself on fire, even though just how it is framed is so silly. But yeah, Sharon lights herself on fire. So Tuscan's stuck out of the house for now, while Reagan has to deal with Lamont dealing with this succubus-looking Reagan that's Pazuzu. And they pluck out her evil heart. And I love the fact that right before they do this, like, the Pazuzu version of Reagan, and again, this is so hard to talk about, hard to explain, but the Pazuzu version of Reagan, which is just Reagan with green eyes, says to Lamont, like, kill her now. And then he goes up, tries to strangle her, and then to Reagan, and Reagan starts speaking in Kokomo's voice, like, she is the good locust, it's to where Lamont breaks free of Pazuzu's trance, and like Kokomo says, we've got to pull out her evil heart. And they pull out, like, Lamont goes and pulls out the succubus Reagan's heart, and like the house starts breaking down, getting destroyed, locusts are flying everywhere. The literal house just gets destroyed while this is happening. And it just ends like where the demon like is gone apparently, and then Lamont and Reagan in this version, this is the theatrical version I've watched, Lamont and Reagan literally run off after they defeat the demon, and Jean just sits there crying and lets them go. And then, like, the policemen come, and they come like 10 minutes later because there's that car crash in the, like, into the Georgetown house. Nobody came out. But 10 minutes later, after all this shit happens, after the house breaks down literally, like, then everybody runs out of their houses like, what happened? That's really silly. But Jean Tuscan stays behind to answer a question, but she just sits there, says nothing, and the policemen are like, ma'am, do you know what happened? Are you okay? And while this is happening, then the strobe lights happen. I don't know if that's supposed to mean more than I think it is. Like, maybe this was just a dream the whole time. Which, this is the perfect way, that's the ending of the movie, and this is the perfect way to describe how I feel about this movie. I feel like it is a wonderful dream. Like, it is such a entrancing film. It has such incredible visuals and incredible effects. Like I said, the scene at the beginning with Lamont watching Jean get her heart kind of being taken by Reagan from the first movie, taking Marin's heart, like showing those scenes back to back on the same screen back together, is really cool. Or any of the visual cues, like this movie has incredible cinematography, Stanley Kubrick type of design in a lot of ways too. The score is incredible. I love the score, I love the whole score, but Reagan's theme is one of my absolute favorite themes ever made, and I think that this movie is just so silly with the acting, with how it's executed, but I love everything about it. I love all these characters. I love how it ends. I love how it starts. I love the whole thing. There's only a couple moments where I feel like it's a little slow, but I still love it regardless of that, like warts and all. So I hate that this is considered one of the worst movies ever made, but I can understand why. But I truly love this movie. I think that this is a fantastic, silly movie. Like, I can't say it's good, but it is silly, but it's got some great things about it. So I really love Exorcist 2, and it's one that I feel like people should at least watch and note, like, the visuals, the cinematography, and how ballsy and different this is to the first one, and just one of the most ballsiest sequels ever made. So I love this movie, despite all the warts that it has, all the problems it has. So this is a great fun rewatch. I love watching this one. So thanks guys so much for watching, and I'm excited to talk about Exorcist 3 next. So thanks for watching this. Tell me down below if you hate this movie, you love this movie, whatever. Comment, rate, subscribe. Thanks for watching.